Jack sat by the fire, the orange light dancing over the jagged rocks around them. The air on this planet was thin, cold enough that each breath left a small cloud drifting into the night. Sparks rose from the flames and vanished into the dark sky. Lyra sat across from him, her blue skin catching the glow of the fire in strange ways, almost shimmering. She was quiet, leaning slightly forward with her chin resting on one hand, watching him with sharp, curious eyes. They had been traveling together for 3 days, and Jack still wasn't sure if she trusted him. She spoke little about herself, but sometimes he caught her smiling when he wasn't looking. Tonight, she seemed restless. Her fingers tapped against the metal clasp on her coat, and her gaze kept drifting to his neck and shoulder like she was studying something. Jack poked at the fire with a stick. "You're staring again," he said with a small smirk. Lyra tilted her head, a faint smile forming on her lips. "Maybe I am." Before he could ask why, she moved suddenly, leaning forward, closing the distance in one smooth motion. Jack froze as her face came close, her warm breath brushing against his skin. Then he felt it, a quick, sharp pinch on his shoulder. He jerked back with a hiss. "Ow! What the hell was that?" Lyra sat back, her smile widening just enough to show her small, pointed teeth. "A bite," she said softly, almost playfully. Jack rubbed the spot, feeling the faint sting. "A bite? Seriously?" She shrugged. "Humans act like they've never been bitten before." Jack chuckled and shook his head. "Not by someone I just met a few days ago. That hurt." Her smile faded for a second, replaced by something unreadable. Worry, maybe, or guilt. Then it was gone, hidden behind her usual calm expression. She leaned back, eyes fixed on the flames. Jack glanced down at his shoulder. No blood, just a faint red mark. "Guess I'll have to watch out for you. You're dangerous." Lyra didn't respond. Her gaze drifted into the dark beyond the firelight, her jaw tight. She touched her lips with her fingertips, almost like she was checking for something. The wind picked up, blowing a fine layer of dust across the campsite. Jack tossed more wood into the fire. It cracked and popped, sending sparks into the sky. Lyra stayed still, eyes narrowed like she was listening for something far away. "What's wrong?" Jack asked. She blinked and shook her head. "Nothing." Her voice was too quick, too sharp. He raised an eyebrow but stayed quiet. Still, the bite circled in his mind. It wasn't just the way she did it. It was the way her whole demeanor shifted afterward. The night stretched on. Jack lay on his bedroll, staring at the stars. They looked different here. Too bright, too sharp. The faint sting on his shoulder had turned into a strange warmth. He touched the spot and frowned. From across the fire, Lyra's voice came, quiet but certain. "You should sleep. We move early." Jack rolled onto his side, watching her silhouette. She was still sitting upright, still staring into the distance, her hand clenched tightly in her coat. "Lyra," he said softly, "why did you bite me?" Her head turned slowly, and in the flickering light, her eyes looked darker than before. "You'll understand later." It wasn't the answer he wanted, but her tone made it clear she wouldn't say more. Jack lay back down, his mind restless. A strange unease took root. It wasn't just her odd behavior. It was the feeling that the bite meant something. Lyra didn't sleep. She kept her gaze fixed on the shadows beyond the firelight, her mind heavy with the weight of what she had done. She hadn't planned it. She had sworn she wouldn't do it. But when Jack laughed earlier, something deep inside her had taken over. The mark was there now, glowing faintly under his skin, though he couldn't see it yet. Somewhere far away, others would feel it too. The bite was not a game. It was not a joke. It was a signal, and once given, it could never be taken back. Jack woke to the sound of something buzzing faintly in his ears. At first, he thought it was an insect, but when he sat up, the sound was still there, deep inside his head. It was steady, like a low hum, and it made the back of his neck prickle. He rubbed his temples, trying to shake it off. The fire had burned down to glowing embers, and Lyra was already packing up their things without looking at him. The air was colder than last night, and a sharp wind cut across the rocky ground. Jack pulled on his jacket and winced when the fabric brushed against his shoulder. The bite mark still stung, but the strange warmth inside it seemed even stronger this morning. It pulsed faintly, in rhythm with his heartbeat. "You didn't sleep much," he said, watching her. "I didn't need to," she replied, her voice flat. She tied a leather strap around her pack and slung it over her shoulder. Jack wanted to ask her again about the bite, but the look in her eyes kept him quiet. Instead, he followed her out into the dusty trail leading toward the nearby settlement. The ground crunched under their boots, and the sky overhead was a pale, washed-out blue. By midday, they reached the edge of a marketplace built between tall, rust-colored stone walls. Stalls made from metal sheets and patched cloth lined the narrow streets. The air smelled of spiced food, smoke, and something sharp and metallic. Dozens of alien species moved through the market. Tall, thin figures with insect-like arms, broad creatures with scaled faces, and smaller ones darting between the crowds. Jack noticed it almost immediately. People were staring at him. Not in a casual way, more like they recognized something. A group of older merchants paused their conversation and followed him with their eyes as he passed. A child hiding behind a food stall pointed at him before their parent pulled them back quickly. "Is it me, or is everyone looking at me weird?" Jack asked under his breath. Lyra didn't answer. She kept walking, her pace quickening. They stopped at a stall selling dried fruits and water containers. The merchant, an older alien with gray ridges across his head, looked at Lyra and then at Jack. His eyes widened. He leaned forward and spoke in a low, urgent tone in his own language. Jack couldn't understand, but the way the man's hands trembled made him uneasy. Lyra replied quickly, her voice tense. The merchant shook his head sharply, muttered something else, and glanced at Jack with open fear before stepping back and refusing to meet his eyes. Jack frowned. What did he say? "Nothing important," Lyra said, handing over a few coins for the goods. "Don't lie to me," Jack snapped. "That guy looked like he'd seen a ghost." She didn't respond. Instead, she turned and moved back into the crowd, forcing Jack to follow. As they left the busier part of the market, the strange buzzing in Jack's head grew stronger. It was no longer just a hum. It was a faint, rhythmic pulse, almost like words he couldn't quite hear. He pressed a hand to his temple, trying to block it out. They stopped in a small, shaded alley to rest. Jack leaned against the wall and finally pulled back his jacket to look at the bite mark. It was no longer just a red spot. Thin, glowing lines had formed around it, faint but clearly visible, like some kind of pattern etched into his skin. "What the hell is this?" he said, showing her. Lyra's eyes darkened. She stepped forward quickly and grabbed his arm, pulling the jacket back over the mark. "Don't show that in public. Ever." "You're going to tell me what's going on right now," Jack said, his voice low but firm. Her jaw tightened. "If I tell you, you won't sleep tonight." "Then I won't sleep," Jack shot back. She took a step back, her eyes scanning the mouth of the alley. "Not here. Too many ears." Jack noticed she was standing closer to him now, almost as if she was shielding him from view. Her hand lingered on the hilt of the knife at her side. "Lyra." She raised a hand sharply, silencing him. Jack froze, listening. At first, he heard nothing but the market noise in the distance. Then, faintly, there it was. Slow, heavy footsteps echoing against the stone walls, coming closer. Lyra's body tensed. She whispered something he couldn't catch, her language sharp and fast. The footsteps stopped just beyond the alley entrance. Jack caught a glimpse of tall figures in dark armor, their faces hidden behind black helmets with glowing red visors. They stood perfectly still, scanning the shadows like hunters searching for prey. Lyra grabbed Jack's wrist and pulled him deeper into the alley, slipping behind a pile of stacked crates. Her grip was tight, almost painful. One of the armored figures spoke in a deep, mechanical voice. "The marked human is here. The Queen's order is clear. Take him alive." Jack's blood ran cold. He turned to Lyra, his voice barely a whisper. "What did they just say?" Her eyes locked with his. "Run." She shoved him toward the far end of the alley as the sound of boots pounding against stone erupted behind them. Jack's boots slammed against the uneven ground as he ran, the narrow alley twisting left and right. Lyra stayed close behind, her footsteps quick and light despite the weight of her pack. Shouts echoed from the armored hunters, their voices deep and sharp, ordering each other to block exits. Somewhere above, a metallic drone hummed, scanning the streets from the air. The path split ahead. Lyra grabbed Jack's arm and yanked him toward the left, ducking under a half-collapsed archway. The stones scraped Jack's shoulder as they squeezed through, and the sting from the bite flared hot. He ignored it, focusing only on the pounding in his chest and the growing sound of pursuit. They burst out into a wider street, crowded with merchants shouting over one another to sell their goods. Lyra shoved Jack toward a cart piled high with woven blankets. "Hide," she ordered. Jack slid between the blankets and the cart's wooden frame, pulling the fabric over himself. Through a small gap, he saw Lyra step into the middle of the street, her hand on the knife at her belt. The hunters emerged seconds later, scanning the crowd with their glowing red visors. One of them pointed at Lyra. "You! Where's the human?" Lyra tilted her head, her voice calm. "What human?" The hunter took a step forward, and in one smooth motion, Lyra's blade flashed. She slashed upward, catching him across the arm joint of his armor. Sparks spat out as he stumbled back. The other hunters moved in, but the sudden chaos sent the market crowd screaming and scattering. Jack stayed hidden, watching her move like water, quick, precise, each strike aimed to disable rather than kill. She wasn't trying to win the fight. She was trying to buy time. "Go," she shouted suddenly, and Jack knew she was talking to him. He pushed out from under the blankets and ran, weaving through the panicked crowd. Behind him, he heard metal clashing and the heavy thud of armored bodies hitting the ground. The buzzing in his head surged again, sharp and insistent now, as if pushing him forward. Lyra caught up with him 2 streets later, grabbing his wrist and pulling him into the shadow of an abandoned building. They both crouched low, listening for pursuit. The sound of boots was still there, but farther away now, mixed with angry shouts. Jack was breathing hard. "You want to tell me what the hell that was?" Her eyes flicked to the street, then back to him. "They're not just soldiers, they're trackers. They can sense the mark." He touched his shoulder. "Because of the bite?" Lyra nodded, her jaw tightening. "It's a bond mark. Once it's given, others like me can feel it, and some will want to use it." Jack's chest tightened. "Use it for what?" She hesitated, and for a moment he thought she might lie again. But her voice was low and steady when she spoke. "The Queen's trials. It's an old law. Whoever carries the bond can challenge for her throne, but only if they survive the hunt first." Jack stared at her. "So you bit me, and now every hunter in this city wants to drag me to the Queen so she can... What? Make me fight?" "It's not that simple," she said. "You can refuse the trial, but refusing means execution. That's the law too." The weight of her words settled heavily between them. Jack leaned against the wall, trying to process it. "You could have told me before we came here." "I didn't plan to mark you," Lyra said sharply. "It was instinct. I thought I could protect you without them knowing, but they felt it faster than I expected." Before Jack could respond, the crunch of gravel reached their ears. Lyra's eyes widened. She grabbed his hand and pulled him through the building's broken doorway. Inside, dust hung in the air, and pale light filtered through cracks in the ceiling. They moved quietly, stepping over rusted tools and shattered glass. The buzzing in Jack's head changed. It wasn't just noise now. It felt like a direction, a pull toward something deeper inside the building. They reached the back room, where the walls were blackened by old fire damage. Lyra pressed herself to the wall and peeked outside through a gap in the boards. 2 hunters stood in the alley beyond, scanning with handheld devices. Jack felt the buzzing spike painfully. Without thinking, he stepped toward the nearest boarded window. His vision sharpened, and he could see faint heat outlines of the hunters through the wood. The sudden clarity made him stumble back. Lyra turned to him sharply. "You saw them, didn't you?" Jack nodded slowly. "I don't know how." "That's the bond," she said. "It's waking up." The sound of footsteps grew louder. Lyra's hand went to her knife again. "We can't stay here." She moved to the rear wall and kicked at a rotted plank until it broke free, revealing a narrow path leading into the hills behind the building. They slipped out, moving quickly over the rocky ground. The city noise faded behind them, replaced by the distant howl of wind across the cliffs. The sky was turning a deeper shade of red, signaling nightfall. Halfway up the slope, Jack glanced back. In the fading light, the black-armored hunters were spilling out of the alley they'd just escaped, their glowing visors sweeping the hillside. "They're still coming," he said. "They won't stop," Lyra replied without looking back. "Not until they have you, or until one of us is dead." The wind tore at Jack's jacket as they climbed higher into the jagged hills. The rocks underfoot were sharp and loose, making every step risky. Lyra moved ahead, light on her feet, glancing back often to check their trail. Jack followed, his breathing heavy but steady. The glow of the twin moons above painted the landscape in pale silver light, and far below, the faint red dots of the hunters' visors moved steadily after them. "They're not slowing down," Jack said between breaths. "They won't," Lyra replied without turning. "They can track the bond like a beacon. We need to lose them before dawn." They reached a narrow ridge, the path dropping sharply on either side. The wind howled louder here, carrying with it a thin metallic smell. Lyra stopped suddenly and crouched low. Ahead, 3 figures in black armor stood blocking the path, their weapons drawn. Jack froze. "They're already here." Lyra's voice dropped to a whisper. "Stay behind me." The lead hunter stepped forward, visor glowing faintly. "Hand over the marked human. You know the Queen's orders." Lyra didn't move. "You'll have to kill me first." The hunter tilted his head. "If that's what you want." In a blur, Lyra pulled a small metal sphere from her belt and tossed it at the ground. It exploded with a blinding flash and a burst of smoke. Jack shielded his eyes as she lunged forward, her blade slicing across the nearest hunter's leg joint. The armor sparked, and the hunter fell to one knee. "Go!" she shouted. Jack didn't hesitate. He ran past the stunned hunters, the ridge path forcing him forward. Lyra followed after delivering a final sharp kick to the downed soldier. Behind them, shouts rose as the remaining hunters gave chase. The path twisted into a narrow tunnel carved into the rock. The air inside was damp and heavy, smelling faintly of earth and oil. Jack's footsteps echoed, and the buzzing in his head returned, stronger than before. It felt like it was pulling him deeper into the tunnel, guiding his steps. "Where does this lead?" Jack asked. "Old mining routes," Lyra answered. "If we're lucky, they won't know the way." The tunnel sloped downward, the ground becoming slick. Jack slipped once, catching himself against the wall. The glow from Lyra's small wrist light revealed strange symbols carved into the rock, spirals, jagged lines, and markings that almost looked like eyes. "What is this place?" Jack asked. Lyra hesitated. "It's older than my people. The mines were built over something ancient. Places like this are dangerous." The buzzing in Jack's head spiked again, so strong it made him stumble. He pressed a hand to the wall for balance, and when he did, the carvings near his fingers seemed to glow faintly. Lyra noticed. "Don't touch them." "I didn't mean to," Jack muttered, pulling his hand back. But the glow didn't fade. Instead, the carvings pulsed once, like they were alive. A distant metallic clang echoed from behind them, hunters entering the tunnel. Lyra cursed under her breath and quickened her pace. They reached a fork in the tunnel. Without hesitation, Lyra pulled Jack to the right, down a steeper path. The air here was warmer, and the buzzing in Jack's head shifted into something almost like a whisper. He couldn't understand the words, but they made the hair on his neck stand on end. Finally, the tunnel opened into a cavern lit by a soft blue glow. Pools of still water reflected the light, and massive crystal-like formations jutted from the walls. The air was warmer here, almost humid. "This should slow them down," Lyra said, moving toward a cluster of rocks. She pushed against one, revealing a narrow gap. "Through here." Jack squeezed through the gap, scraping his shoulder. The heat from the bite mark flared painfully, making him hiss in pain. Lyra glanced at him sharply. "It's getting stronger." "Feels like it," he said through gritted teeth. They emerged into another passage, this one leading upward. Behind them, faint voices echoed through the cavern, followed by splashes as the hunters moved through the pools. Lyra quickened her pace, but Jack noticed her steps faltering slightly. "You're limping," he said. "It's nothing," she replied, but he saw the dark stain of blood on her boot. The tunnel finally ended at a narrow ledge overlooking a steep drop. Below, the land stretched out in dark waves of rock and shadow. Lyra scanned the cliffside and pointed to a thin trail winding down. "That way. We'll reach the canyons by morning." A faint hum filled the air again, different from the one in Jack's head. He turned to see a hunter's drone rising from below the cliff, its red scanner sweeping toward them. "Down!" Lyra hissed, pushing him flat against the rock. The drone hovered closer, its light passing just over their heads. Jack's pulse raced. If the drone spotted them, the hunters would be on them in minutes. He glanced at Lyra, who was gripping her knife so tightly her knuckles were pale. The drone paused, as if sensing something, then began to rise higher. Lyra seized the chance, grabbing Jack's arm and pulling him toward the trail. They moved fast, careful not to send loose rocks tumbling. Halfway down, the buzzing in Jack's head became almost unbearable. He stumbled, nearly falling over the edge. Lyra caught him, her eyes locking on his with an intensity that sent a chill down his spine. "They're getting closer," she said, "and the bond is calling to them louder than before." By the time they reached the canyon floor, the night air was thick and heavy. The cliffs rose on both sides, towering walls of dark stone that trapped every sound. Jack could hear their footsteps echoing, and somewhere far behind, the steady rhythm of armored boots followed. Lyra kept her head low, moving quickly between jagged boulders and shadowed overhangs. Jack's shoulder burned hotter than ever, and the strange buzzing had shifted into a faint, almost rhythmic thump, as if something inside his skin was beating in time with his heart. He pressed a hand to it, but the heat only grew. "How much longer can we keep this up?" he asked, his voice low. "Until they stop chasing," Lyra replied, "or until we find somewhere they won't follow." "And where's that?" Her gaze flicked to the dark ahead. "The Black Cavern." Jack frowned. "Doesn't sound like a friendly place." "It's not," she said simply, "but it's better than being caught." They moved in silence for a while, the canyon narrowing around them. Strange plants grew from the cracks in the stone, their pale leaves glowing faintly in the darkness. The air was warmer here, almost damp, and every now and then Jack thought he heard faint whispers, but when he turned, there was no one. The path curved sharply, and they came to a small stream cutting across the canyon floor. Lyra crouched to drink, but Jack noticed she was slower now. The limp in her step was worse, and when she shifted her leg, he caught a glimpse of blood soaking through the side of her boot. "You're hurt," he said. "It's fine," she replied without meeting his eyes. "It's not fine. You're bleeding." She shot him a glare. "If I slow down, we die. Keep moving." Jack clenched his jaw but didn't argue. He followed her along the stream until the sound of running water grew louder. Soon, they reached a wide pool fed by a thin waterfall spilling from the rocks above. The air was cooler here, mist drifting across the surface. Lyra stopped suddenly, holding up a hand. "Quiet." Jack froze, listening. At first, he heard nothing but the waterfall. Then, faintly, the crunch of gravel from the shadows beyond the pool. A figure stepped into view, tall, armored, visor glowing red. Another appeared behind him, then a third. They had found them. Lyra's knife was in her hand before Jack could speak. "Run for the far tunnel," she whispered. "I'll hold them off." "No," Jack said sharply. "You can't fight them all in your condition." Her eyes narrowed. "I can buy you time." Before he could argue, the first hunter charged. Lyra met him head on, blade flashing. Sparks burst as she struck the weak points in his armor. Jack didn't want to leave, but instinct told him she was right. They needed distance. He sprinted along the edge of the pool toward a dark opening in the canyon wall. A sharp crack rang out behind him, and he turned in time to see one of the hunters collapse, but two more moved in on Lyra. Jack's hands clenched into fists. He couldn't just watch. Without thinking, he grabbed a loose stone the size of his head and hurled it at the nearest hunter. The rock struck his helmet, making him stumble. Lyra took the opening, driving her knife into the gap under his arm. "Move!" she shouted again, and this time Jack obeyed. They reached the tunnel entrance together, diving into the darkness as the hunters regrouped. The passage was narrow, forcing them to move single file. Jack led, his eyes slowly adjusting to the dim light filtering from cracks in the rock. The buzzing in his head was almost deafening now, but with it came something else: clarity. He could sense movement ahead, faint shifts in the air, like the tunnel itself was warning him. He stopped abruptly and raised a hand. "There's something up ahead." Lyra glanced at him. "You can feel it?" "Yeah, like someone's waiting for us." Her expression turned grim. "That's the bond. It's making you more aware, but it also means they'll find us faster." They crept forward until the tunnel widened into a hollow chamber. Strange crystals jutted from the floor and walls, glowing with pale light. The air hummed softly, vibrating in Jack's bones. Lyra stepped ahead, touching one of the crystals. "These react to energy. If the hunters enter, we'll know." Jack's gaze swept the chamber. There was only one exit on the far side, but before they could reach it, a faint red glow flickered in the tunnel behind them. The hunters were coming. "Can we block the entrance?" Jack asked. "Not in time," Lyra said, drawing her knife again. "We stand here." The first hunter stepped into the chamber, weapon raised. Jack's pulse surged, and without warning, A wave of heat burst from the mark on his shoulder. The nearest crystal flared brightly, and a sharp crack of light shot out, striking the hunter's chest and sending him crashing into the wall. Jack stared in shock. "I didn't mean to." "That's the bond," Lyra said quickly. "You can use it now." The remaining hunters hesitated, but only for a moment before charging. Lyra moved to intercept one, while Jack, still unsure of what he'd done, focused on the mark. Heat rose again, and another crystal flared, sending a burst of light into the second attacker. When the last hunter fell, the chamber fell silent, except for their breathing. Lyra sheathed her knife and looked at him with something like pride. "You're learning faster than I thought," she said. Jack glanced at his shoulder. The mark was glowing faintly, and for the first time he felt more powerful than afraid. But the fear wasn't gone. It was just waiting for the next attack. They didn't rest long in the crystal chamber. The faint glow from the mark on Jack's shoulder had begun to fade, but the heat stayed, a constant reminder of what had just happened. Lyra kept glancing at him as they walked toward the far tunnel, her expression thoughtful, almost calculating. "You need to understand something," she said quietly. "The bond doesn't just give you strength, it also links you to me. If I'm hurt, you'll feel it. If I die, so will you." Jack slowed, absorbing her words. "That's not exactly comforting." "It's not meant to be," she replied, keeping her eyes forward. "But it's why they want you alive. The Queen can use that bond to control you, or destroy you, depending on her plans." The tunnel narrowed, and they had to walk single file. Jack could hear water dripping somewhere ahead, the sound echoing in the darkness. The air was damp and cool, carrying the faint smell of minerals. His boots scraped against the stone floor, and every sound seemed too loud. "How much farther to this black cavern you mentioned?" he asked. "Not far," Lyra said. "But once we go in, there's no turning back." "Why?" "Because no one follows anyone into the cavern unless they're ready to die." Jack frowned. "That's supposed to make me feel better?" "It's supposed to make you understand," she said simply. The tunnel eventually opened into a vast space. The ceiling was so high Jack couldn't see it, even with the faint glow from the crystals. The ground sloped downward into a yawning black opening that seemed to swallow all light. A strange wind blew from it, carrying whispers that weren't quite voices, but still made the hair on his arms stand up. "That's it?" Jack asked. Lyra nodded once. "The black cavern." Before they could move forward, a faint metallic click echoed from behind them. Jack spun around to see the red glow of visors in the darkness. The hunters had found them again. "Go," Lyra said, stepping between him and the advancing soldiers. "No," Jack said firmly. "I'm not leaving you to fight alone." Her eyes met his for a brief moment. Then she gave a short nod. "Stay close. Use the crystals if you can." The hunters moved in, their weapons humming with power. Lyra lunged first, her blade flashing in the dim light. Jack focused on the mark, feeling the heat build. The nearest crystal along the tunnel wall began to glow in response, and he directed the energy toward the closest attacker. A pulse of light shot out, knocking the hunter off his feet. Another charged at him, but Jack sidestepped clumsily, grabbing the soldier's arm and twisting it with all the strength he could muster. The armor joint gave way with a loud crack, and the hunter stumbled, giving Lyra the opening to finish him. But there were too many. 3 more advanced at once, forcing them backward toward the mouth of the cavern. "Inside!" Lyra shouted. They retreated into the darkness. The moment they crossed the threshold, the air changed, thicker, heavier, and filled with a low hum that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Jack could barely see, but the glowing lines of his bond mark lit faint outlines in the stone. Strange shapes carved into the walls seemed to move in the corner of his vision, shifting whenever he tried to look directly at them. The hunters followed, but their steps slowed. One of them hesitated, scanning the walls. A moment later, a sharp, unnatural screech filled the air, and something in the dark moved fast. Too fast. A shadow darted across the tunnel, and the hunter screamed. When Jack's eyes adjusted enough to see, the soldier was gone, dragged into the darkness. "What was that?" Jack whispered. Lyra's voice was low and steady. "The reason they don't come in here." The remaining hunters backed away, retreating toward the entrance. Soon, the red glow of their visors disappeared completely, leaving only the faint lines of Jack's glowing mark to light the space. They moved deeper. the ground beneath them turning slick with moisture. The hum grew louder, and the walls seemed to close in before opening suddenly into a massive underground chamber. In the center stood a stone platform carved with intricate symbols, and above it hung a cluster of crystals unlike any they had seen before. Jet black, yet somehow glowing faintly from within. Lyra stepped toward the platform cautiously. This place is older than both our worlds, and it's the only place where the bond can be changed. Jack approached slowly. Changed how? It can be strengthened, she said, looking at him intently. Or broken. But both come with a cost. And what's the cost? Her gaze dropped to the floor. Strengthening it means tying our lives even closer. Breaking it means we might not survive the process. Jack stared at the black crystals, feeling their strange pull. The heat in his shoulder pulsed in time with the faint light inside them. So whatever we choose, it's dangerous. Yes, she said softly, and the queen will come for us either way. Jack exhaled slowly, the weight of the decision pressing on him. In the silence that followed, the hum of the cavern seemed to deepen, almost like it was waiting for his choice. Jack stood at the edge of the stone platform, the black crystals above him pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. The air was heavy, almost pressing against his skin, and every breath felt thick. Lyra circled the platform slowly, her eyes never leaving the strange carvings under their feet. Each symbol seemed to shift slightly when he looked away, as if alive. We don't have much time, she said finally. Once the queen realizes the hunters failed, she'll come herself. This is our only chance to decide. Jack's hand went to his shoulder, feeling the heat of the bond burning against his skin. If we break it, will she stop hunting me? Lyra shook her head. She'll hunt us both, but you'll lose the strength the bond gives you. You'll be just human again. And if we strengthen it, her gaze met his. You'll be more than human, but you'll be bound to me in ways you can't imagine. My life, your life, one thread. If one of us falls, the other follows. The weight of her words settled between them. Jack looked up at the black crystals, their faint inner glow matching the pulse in his shoulder. What would you choose? Lyra hesitated. I would choose to fight. A low rumble echoed through the cavern before Jack could answer. The air grew colder, and a faint light appeared in the far tunnel. It was not the red glow of hunter visors. This was a pale, icy light that crept along the walls. Lyra's expression hardened. She's here. From the darkness, a tall figure emerged, taller than any hunter they had faced. Her armor was silver and black, shaped like flowing metal, and her eyes glowed a sharp, unnatural blue. The queen's presence filled the space, her voice echoing without effort. So this is the marked human, she said, stepping closer. You've run far, but the bond brings you back to me. Jack felt the heat in his shoulder spike, as if reacting to her words. I'm not yours to take, he said, trying to sound steady. The queen smiled faintly. The bond belongs to my bloodline, and if you won't kneel, I'll take it from your corpse. Lyra stepped between them, her knife drawn. You'll have to kill me first. The queen's gaze slid to her. You were always reckless, Lyra. Marking a human was a foolish gamble. Before Jack could react, the queen raised her hand. A wave of icy force shot forward, knocking Lyra back across the platform. Jack stumbled, but stayed upright, the bond burning hot in response. The black crystals above them flared, and for a moment Jack felt a surge of energy flood his veins. The queen advanced. I will end this now. Jack focused on the heat in his shoulder, willing it to grow. The crystals answered, sending a shock of light down through his body. His vision sharpened, and the slow movements of the queen's armor became clear. When she struck, he moved faster than he thought possible, sidestepping and driving his fist into the gap at her side. The blow made her stagger, but her eyes narrowed. You've learned quickly, she said. Good. I like my prey strong. Lyra was back on her feet, limping but determined. She moved to flank the queen, her strikes sharp and deliberate. Jack stayed in front, keeping the queen's attention. Together, they forced her back toward the edge of the platform. But the queen was not finished. With a sudden twist, she caught Lyra's wrist, forcing her to drop her blade, and flung her to the ground. Jack lunged, tackling the queen before she could strike. The two of them hit the stone hard, and Jack felt the bond's heat flare so bright it almost blinded him. The black crystals above pulsed wildly, and Jack realized what they were offering. A final surge, enough to end the fight. But he also knew what Lyra had warned. Strengthening the bond now would tie their lives completely. He glanced at her. She met his eyes, breathing hard, and gave a single nod. Jack let the power in. It roared through him, burning and cold all at once, until it felt like his bones were filled with light. The queen tried to push him away, but his strength was no longer just his own. It was theirs, joined. With one final strike, he drove the energy into her chest. A blinding flash filled the cavern, and when it faded, the queen was gone, nothing but a faint scorch mark on the stone. The crystals dimmed, the hum in the air fading to silence. Jack collapsed to his knees, breathing hard. Lyra knelt beside him, her hand gripping his arm. "It's done," she said quietly. Jack nodded, though he knew the truth. The queen was gone, but the bond was now stronger than ever. He could feel her heartbeat inside his own, her breath syncing with his. As they left the black cavern, the air outside felt lighter, but neither spoke for a long time. They both understood that from this point on, there was no turning back. They were bound, for life, for war, for whatever came next.